Ethan Walker stood before the large mirror in the master bedroom of his vast house, where the soft morning light filtered through the clear glass window, reflecting a perfect image of him. A successful man in a crisp white shirt and a carefully tailored black suit. The small details like the tight knot of his tie and the shiny leather shoes made him look like a model businessman, but his expression in the mirror was something entirely different. It wasn't confidence or pride. It was emptiness. Ethan saw nothing in the mirror but a man who had been robbed of too much by life, a man too accustomed to loneliness and sorrow. The coldness from the room, from his very heart, filled the vast space, making him feel as though he were living in a grand, empty, and desolate box. He raised his hand gently, brushing his thick black hair, then closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The sense of a perfect life once built flawlessly from the outside now seemed nothing more than a fragile shell. Everything was too perfect. But that's exactly what it lacked: love and warmth. He didn't know where to find the lost feelings, or if he would ever find them again. Ethan's gaze inevitably drifted to the family photo on the small table beside the mirror. In the frame was a pure moment of happiness. Kate, his late wife, holding Lily, their daughter, in her arms. The three of them smiled joyously, like a complete, perfect family, with no cracks. But that was just a moment from the past, a moment he couldn't relive. He couldn't go back to Kate, to the years that had passed. The memories of Kate, the peaceful mornings when they drank coffee together, the conversations about the future they had envisioned, now felt like fragments quietly fading away with time. Kate had lost a fight against the cruel disease of cancer. Bit by bit, the illness took everything they had built together. And then, in a moment, she was gone. Ethan had promised himself he would do everything to ensure Lily never lacked love. But he didn't know how to love again, how to open his heart to someone. All he could do was continue working relentlessly to build a future for his daughter. Yet none of those efforts ever made him feel truly alive. He only existed. Ethan turned back to the mirror once again, wondering if his life would ever return to normal. Not the life of a wealthy, powerful man, but a real life, one filled with love, care, and connection. Ethan's company was preparing for an important gala where partners, clients, and influential figures would gather. It was an opportunity to showcase the company's success, but also a chance to strengthen business relationships. Ethan knew he had to make an impression on the attendees, but he couldn't do it alone. His wife was gone, and in the years since he had never opened his heart to anyone else. To avoid unnecessary attention, he decided to hire a woman to be his fake girlfriend for the event. He searched through a service app specializing in providing companions for events. After browsing several profiles, he decided on Rachel Graves. She had a beautiful, elegant appearance and seemed very professional. Ethan only needed a woman to attend the event with him, to create the perfect image for those around him. He didn't expect much from her beyond playing the role of a fake girlfriend. When he first contacted Rachel, Ethan simply said it would be a short-term arrangement. He wanted her to show up, make an impression, and then everything would end after the gala. But a part of him still felt a strange connection through their initial conversation. Although it was just a transaction, he sensed something genuine in Rachel's voice. Something he hadn't found in anyone since Kate's passing. In the days leading up to the event, Ethan was busy with work, handling a dozen contracts and meetings with partners from all over. Despite hiring Rachel, he didn't really think much about her. His life revolved around work and his daughter, and that was all he could focus on. Occasionally, when he came home after a long day, he'd see Lily peacefully asleep, her face serene without a worry in the world. She was the only reason he continued to live in this world. But something strange happened as Ethan prepared for the event. He began thinking about Rachel. Was she really the right person to play the role of a fake girlfriend for one night? Could she help him create the image he needed? He wondered if a fake relationship could turn into something real. But that was just a temporary choice. Rachel was an outsider, and she just needed to show up at the party, and then it would all end. When Rachel arrived at the house to prepare for the event, Lily was the first to greet her. The little girl ran up, her eyes sparkling with light, the complete opposite of the coldness Ethan felt every day. In a strange moment, when Lily looked at Rachel, she smiled and said, "Hello, Momsy." This surprised Ethan. Lily was usually very shy around strangers, but immediately Rachel had won the little girl's affection. She bent down gently, comforting Lily, and an odd, strong connection formed between them. Ethan stood from a distance, feeling a twinge of jealousy. That scene reminded him of Kate, how she had cared for Lily. He had never seen Lily connect so quickly with anyone, even in just a few short minutes. But then he shook his head, telling himself this was just a temporary arrangement. Ethan didn't know that from this moment on, his life would change forever. While he thought he only needed a woman to fill the gap at the party, he didn't realize he was inviting something much deeper, a love he never thought he could experience again. The gala night came quickly, with all the grandeur that Ethan's company had prepared. Every detail was attended to, from the shimmering lights of the chandeliers to the tables full of expensive food and wine. Everything was arranged perfectly, like a painting that depicted the image of a world Ethan had painstakingly built, a powerful, wealthy, perfect man. But that was just the surface. Ethan entered the ballroom holding his glass of wine, trying to appear natural, though inside he couldn't find peace. He knew tonight wouldn't just be another party. It would be a test not only for his career, but also for his personal life, which had been locked away after Kate's death. He couldn't let his partners see the absence, the gap in his family that couldn't be filled. That was why he had hired Rachel. When she entered, the light from the chandeliers illuminated Rachel's figure, highlighting her elegant beauty. The emerald green dress accentuated her fair skin. Each step she took was full of confidence, but also charm. Rachel looked around, and when her eyes met Ethan's, she smiled, a warm smile yet somewhat shy. Ethan realized that although she was just someone he had hired temporarily, her presence had an unexpected impact on the room around them. Curious gazes from the partners and colleagues at the event were all directed toward them, as if the whole world was waiting for their combination to create the perfect image. And in a strange moment, he felt like he had found something he didn't expect: connection. The rest of the party passed by with bland conversations, polite handshakes, and obligatory smiles. But amidst all the fake laughter, Ethan couldn't help but notice that with each passing minute, he felt warmth slowly awakening in his heart. Rachel was not just the woman by his side at the party. She had become a part of his life, though temporarily, though just an image created for a short-term purpose. While Ethan chatted with partners, his eyes would sneak back to Rachel. She didn't participate in the dry negotiations, but she connected with others through the sincerity in her eyes and smile. She listened intently to the stories around her, laughing naturally, without any pretense, as if she truly cared about everything around her. And then, as the initial tension wore off, Lily appeared. The little girl ran into the ballroom in a pink tulle dress, her black hair flowing gently and her eyes shining brightly in the night. But instead of rushing into Ethan's arms as usual, Lily stopped in front of Rachel. A few moments of hesitation passed. Then Lily looked up at Rachel with an innocent, loving gaze and suddenly asked, "Can Mom Z stay with us and Mom Z stay forever?" A burst of laughter rang out from the people around them, breaking the heavy atmosphere and making everyone in the ballroom feel awkward. But to Ethan, the question was like a shining ray of light, a hint that things could change. Rachel was no longer just a woman he had hired. She had become part of their story, not in a fake way, but in a way Ethan couldn't explain. Ethan stood there looking at Rachel, then at Lily, feeling surprise and an indescribable emotion rise in his chest. Rachel raised an eyebrow, her face unable to believe what she had just heard. She smiled gently, bent down to be at eye level with Lily, and responded in a soft yet warm voice. "Mom Z is very happy that you want that. But let's see how things go, okay?" Lily didn't respond, just looked at Rachel with innocent eyes as if she had found a friend, a mother who she truly needed in this world. The sincerity in her made everyone around them feel uneasy, and Ethan, though trying to avoid any awkward situations, felt warmth creeping into his heart. Was this the feeling he had been missing all this time? A sense of connection, a real family. For the rest of the evening, Ethan couldn't help but notice how Rachel and Lily interacted with each other. Every time the little girl looked at Rachel, her eyes lit up as if she had found a close friend. Rachel treated Lily not just as a child, but as a companion, always gentle and caring, even though they had only met for a short time. Ethan watched Rachel caring for Lily, gently touching her hair, comforting her when she seemed a little tired. And in that moment, something stirred in his heart. The feeling he had long stopped hoping to find love. Not the love of his late wife, not pity for a hired girlfriend, but real love like a door opening deep within his soul. When the party ended, Ethan felt an unusual kind of exhaustion. He had participated in the lives of others, laughed, conversed, but it was all just a surface layer. Yet when he saw Rachel and Lily walking out together, Rachel's hand resting lightly on Lily's shoulder, he realized that not everything was fake. Rachel looked at Ethan, her gaze gentle yet hesitant. He simply nodded and softly said, "Thank you, Rachel. Thank you for making everything easier." Rachel only smiled, replying softly, "It's nothing, Ethan. This is what I can do." In that moment, as they walked out of the grand ballroom, Ethan felt a transformation deep within him, a change he couldn't explain, but that was clearly real. And in the following nights, even though they were quiet, dimly lit evenings, the memories of that night stayed with him. Was what he felt in that moment real or just a temporary illusion? But one thing was certain. Ever since Rachel stepped into his life, loneliness was no longer his constant companion. The next morning, in the soft light of dawn, Ethan's vast house seemed still. After the gala, the atmosphere in the house seemed to have changed. Ethan, although he had had time to reflect on what happened the night before, still felt a sense of unease weighing on his mind. He sat at the dining table, a cup of cold coffee in front of him, its flavor long faded. The faint light from the window streamed in, yet the picture of his life had not yet undergone any clear change. He was still just a lonely man. The only thing keeping him tied to this life was Lily, his daughter. Lily walked into the dining room, her hair tousled, her eyes still sleepy, but they quickly opened wide when she saw Ethan. "Good morning, Dad," she called out, rushing over to him and giving him a hug. The warmth from her small hands sparked a soft feeling in Ethan's heart, one he hadn't felt in a long time. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well?" Ethan smiled, stroking her hair, but in his smile there was something missing. He couldn't lie to himself, his life still lacked something very important. Lily glanced at Ethan's phone, then asked, "Where's Mom?" Ethan flinched slightly, surprised by the question. "Mom Z," he asked, confused. Lily nodded happily. "Yes, Mom, yeah, Z is her. She's so beautiful. She likes me, I can tell." Ethan recalled the moments from the night before when Lily had called Rachel Mom Z, a nickname the little girl had given to the fake girlfriend he had hired. Rachel might not be a part of their family, but to Lily, the connection had started early. A sense of surprise and a bit of worry crept into Ethan's heart. After all, she was only 6 years old, but the way she had bonded with Rachel made him think. When he first met her at the party, Rachel had been just a random choice. She was someone Ethan needed to maintain his perfect image in the eyes of his business partners. But the more he interacted with her, the more he felt there was something unusual. She was unlike the women he had met before. Rachel didn't smile awkwardly, didn't try to please anyone to show off her best side. She was simply herself. In the days following the gala, Ethan found himself thinking more and more about Rachel, her smile, the sincerity in the stories she had shared. He couldn't stop feeling that connection, even though he had been trying to avoid it. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time, and it made it hard to ignore. One afternoon, when Ethan came home, he saw Rachel sitting with Lily in the living room. They were drawing small pictures with Lily's childish scribbles being carefully touched up by Rachel. It was a sight Ethan had never seen in his own home, a scene full of warmth and light. Rachel's natural ease in connecting with Lily made him pause and look at them. "Thank you for helping, Lily," Ethan spoke, breaking the silence between them. Rachel looked up and smiled gently. "No problem, she's such a sweet girl." Ethan felt there was something different in her words. She wasn't just an outsider like he had thought. She genuinely cared for Lily. It wasn't a facade. "She had such a fun day," Rachel continued. "She's very talented, really. She draws beautifully, Ethan." He sat down near them, watching Lily intently coloring. A strange sense of relief spread through him. This was the first time since his wife's passing that he felt his home no longer had a sense of coldness, but rather a family warmth. "Thank you, Rachel," Ethan said, his voice deepening. "You're a very special person." The following days passed quietly. Ethan's life continued to revolve around work meetings and taking care of Lily. However, he couldn't help but notice that he was gradually putting himself in situations he hadn't expected. His growing closeness to Rachel became more evident. She was no longer just someone who helped him fill the void at the gala. She had become a part of his life, and he couldn't explain why that was happening. One evening after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan found himself sitting across from Rachel in the living room, the soft yellow light illuminating the space. Rachel had tidied up and made some tea. Ethan looked at her, the silence stretching between them, before he finally spoke. "Rachel, have you ever thought that we might be doing this wrong?" Ethan's question made them both pause for a moment. Rachel looked at him, her eyes sparkling under the dim light. But there was no defensiveness or hesitation. "I think we're just living true to ourselves," she replied, her voice gentle yet direct. "What's wrong with finding a little peace in our own truth?" Ethan fell silent, contemplating her answer. It was true, over the past period he had only lived for work, for the outward image of a successful man. He hadn't allowed himself to truly feel love, care, or simply the connection that a family needed. "You know, Rachel," Ethan said, his voice growing low, "I've spent my life trying to keep a solid wall up. But after everything that's happened, I'm not sure I have the strength to keep going." Rachel looked at him intently, empathy in her eyes, something Ethan had not recognized for a long time. "We're not perfect," Rachel said. "We're just people with pain, with unmet desires, and sometimes we find comfort in what seems like random moments. But no one can live forever behind a wall. We have to let ourselves live truthfully." Ethan looked at her as though he were just beginning to understand what she meant. And in that moment, he felt a connection, a profound shift in his heart. He didn't know if this was the start of a relationship or just an experiment in his life. But either way, at least he had felt something real, a feeling he had long forgotten. The conversations between Ethan and Rachel became more intimate, more genuine. Their relationship was no longer just a simple contract. They began to understand each other more with each story, with each emotion shared. Rachel was no longer an outsider. She had become an important part of Ethan and Lily's lives. And perhaps this would open a new journey for all three of them. Each passing day, Ethan couldn't help but feel the change within himself. He couldn't explain it, but one thing was certain: the relationship between him and Rachel was no longer just a combination for a gala. It was a deep transformation, a willingness to open up to love, to truth, and to himself. The next morning, the soft light of dawn filtered through the large window, casting a warm glow over the family portrait in the living room. But today, the vast house no longer felt as cold as before. Ethan woke up early, as it had become a part of his routine over the years. He sat at the dining table trying to get used to this feeling. The feeling of a peaceful day, perhaps the first one in many years. Yet he still couldn't shake the indescribable feeling in his heart. Lily, the energetic and bright girl, was always the only light in this house. But this time Rachel's presence had brought a fresh breeze. The little girl rushed into the dining room and hugged Ethan as she always did. Her embrace was warm, but Lily's eyes today seemed unusual. There was a longing and yearning in them that seemed deeper than usual. "Dad, I want to draw a picture for Moms," Lily said, her eyes shining brightly. Ethan was slightly taken aback. When had she started calling Rachel Mom Z, and why was there such closeness? Ethan looked at Lily, then at the picture she was coloring, her childish scribbles now turning into simple yet poetic strokes. Everything in this house seemed to be changing, day by day, minute by minute. When Lily ran outside to continue playing, Ethan quietly stepped into the living room and saw Rachel sitting in the armchair, a book in her hands, but her eyes were not focused on the pages. Instead, her gaze drifted out the window, following a cloud floating lazily across the sky. A sudden realization crept into Ethan's heart, as if he had just noticed something he hadn't seen before. Rachel looked up and smiled when she saw Ethan. She put the book down, then stood up. "Good morning, Ethan. Did you sleep well?" Rachel asked, her voice gentle, as if she wanted to create a comfortable space for him. "All right," Ethan replied, then paused for a moment. "Rachel, you know I never thought things would change this quickly." Rachel looked at him, her eyes no longer cautious or shy. Instead, there was a silent understanding in them. "Sometimes unexpected things happen, don't they?" she said, laughing softly. "Life is often a series of crossroads. I don't think we can plan everything, but sometimes what feels natural makes us feel right." Ethan said nothing further, only silently observed Rachel. There was something different about her, a gentleness he had never noticed before. She was no longer just an outsider, a temporary hire for the gala. She had become a part of his story, a part he hadn't fully understood yet. Ethan and Rachel had dinner together with Lily. The atmosphere at the table was cozy, no longer the heavy silence that usually filled the room. Lily chatted and laughed happily occasionally, interrupting with innocent questions about life, about stories she'd never thought about. Stories about cars, pet dogs, and magical moments from fairy tales. And suddenly, Rachel paused when she heard Lily ask about her mother. "Dad, is Mom?" "My mom." Lily looked up at Ethan, her eyes as pure as a child seeking a simple answer. Ethan fell silent for a moment, then looked at Rachel. He didn't know how to answer. Everything with Rachel was still new, and he wasn't sure how to explain things to Lily. But looking at Rachel, he felt an odd sense of reassurance. Rachel gently placed her hand on Lily's, smiling softly. "Sweetheart, Mom Z isn't your mom. But Mom Z will always be here to help you, to be your friend." Her voice was soft but steady, with no worry or confusion. Lily nodded, her eyes still full of innocence and trust. Ethan couldn't help but feel a strange yet warm sensation in his heart. Why was it so easy? Why had Rachel been able to bond with Lily so quickly? And that made Ethan wonder, could his feelings for her grow even deeper? Could he find love again? Or was it just an illusion? After dinner, when Lily had gone to bed, the house became quiet again. Ethan and Rachel sat in the living room, the table lamp casting a soft yellow light. The atmosphere between them was no longer one of hesitance, but one of truth they had to face. Ethan had thought about everything that had happened, and he knew it was time to have an honest conversation with Rachel. Rachel, he began, his voice deep and sure. We need to talk. Rachel looked at him, no surprise in her eyes, only a gentle empathy in her gaze. About what, she asked, her voice soft but serious. About what I've been feeling all this time, Ethan replied, his eyes meeting hers as if he wanted to make sure Rachel would understand. About our relationship. It's not just a contract anymore, is it? Rachel sat in silence for a moment, then sighed. She understood what he was saying, because she felt it too. She was no longer just the woman who appeared at parties. She was no longer just the fake girlfriend. She had become an important part of Ethan and Lily's life, even though it had only been a few days. I know, Rachel said softly. I feel it too. But we have to be careful, Ethan. I don't want to rush into anything. This is all too new, too fast, and it could hurt us. Not just us, but Lily too. Ethan looked at her, then out the window where the sky had turned to a deep purple black of the evening. He didn't know if this was the beginning of something lasting, but one thing he knew for sure: he couldn't ignore this feeling. The feeling of a real family. Not because they could change the past, not because they could build a future immediately, but because the connection between them was real. And Ethan knew he was ready for a new beginning, even though the road ahead would be filled with challenges. But most importantly, he no longer felt alone, and that was all he needed. Each day began with a sense of peace Ethan hadn't experienced in years. He woke up early, as was his old habit, but today he didn't feel the exhaustion that usually followed him. Instead, there was something in the air that made him feel full of energy. Perhaps it was Rachel's presence. She was no longer just the fake girlfriend he had once imagined. She had become an irreplaceable part of his family, and that made Ethan feel a change stirring in his heart. This morning, as he walked down the stairs, he heard Lily's laughter echoing from the kitchen. It was a pure, cheerful sound, like a playful tune. When he entered the kitchen, he saw Rachel pouring milk for Lily. The two of them were talking about the drawings Lily had made the day before, and Rachel had skillfully complimented her, making Lily beam with happiness. Good morning, Ethan said with a soft smile as he watched the scene unfold. Rachel smiled and waved at him. Good morning, Ethan. Did you sleep well? All right, Ethan replied, but his gaze lingered on the sight of Rachel and Lily. I never thought I'd see this, seeing a woman who's not my wife being so close to my daughter. Rachel laughed softly, setting the milk down before turning to look at him. Lily is very special. She's even sweeter and smarter than I thought, she said, tilting her head and looking sincerely at Lily before turning back to Ethan. She looks a lot like you, Ethan. Ethan couldn't help but feel moved by her words. For all these years, it had just been him and Lily, and he had never imagined that anyone else could make her feel loved like this. But now Rachel's presence, though she wasn't Lily's mother, had brought warmth and safety to his daughter. Ethan felt that their conversations no longer felt forced, no longer full of pleasantries. They were heartfelt exchanges, quiet moments of meaning. Rachel wasn't just the woman who helped him fill the void in his life. She was someone he began to find comfort in during their small talks, someone with whom he shared empathy in fleeting glances. She was no longer just a hired girlfriend for the gala. She had become a true companion, a real partner. One Saturday evening after dinner, Ethan and Rachel went outside into the yard. The sunset was slowly fading the clear sky, transitioning into shades of orange and yellow, creating a rare moment of tranquility. Lily had gone to bed early, and now only the two of them remained in the house. They stood side by side in silence, watching the sun set. "I've always enjoyed watching sunsets," Rachel spoke, breaking the silence. Ethan turned to look at her and realized that her voice no longer held any worry or hesitation. She spoke naturally, as if they had known each other for a long time. "Really?" Ethan asked, chuckling softly. "I never paid attention to things like that. Work and life have made me forget the little moments." Rachel smiled. "Maybe that's why your life is always in a rush. But sometimes we need to pause and notice the things around us. The world isn't just about work, money, and success, Ethan." Ethan felt her words like a gentle reminder. He realized that since Kate's passing, he had been racing against time, against work, against the pain in his heart, never stopping to appreciate the little things, the things that truly bring happiness. And now Rachel was helping him to see that again. "You're right," Ethan said, his eyes turning toward the distance. "I've been living too fast. I don't even know what I really want anymore." Rachel turned to look at him, her gaze soft and understanding. "Maybe you've spent too much time hiding your feelings. But no one can live forever behind that wall, Ethan. We have to learn to let go." Her words felt like a gentle breeze passing through his soul. Ethan couldn't deny that what she said was exactly what he had forgotten over the years. He couldn't keep living in the shell he had built. He needed to find a way to open up, not just to live for Lily, but also for himself. Ethan began to pay more attention to Rachel's gestures, every smile, every glance, every kind word she shared with him and Lily. She wasn't just caring for his daughter. She was helping him reconnect with the values he had long forgotten. And in his eyes, Rachel was no longer just the woman he had hired as a fake girlfriend for a party. She had become an irreplaceable part of his life. One afternoon, while they were cooking together, Rachel stood next to Ethan, watching him mix a bowl of salad while she chopped vegetables. It was one of those simple moments, but it brought a warm feeling. They didn't say much, just worked together in silence, sharing the space without words. Ethan felt that this was the first time he had truly felt peaceful in so long. "Thank you for staying," Ethan said suddenly, as his hands paused for a moment. Rachel turned to look at him, her eyes sparkling. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm not sure where I've found myself, but I feel like I truly belong here." Ethan didn't say anything more, just looked at her with a tender gaze. That thank you wasn't just words. It was an acknowledgement of a relationship slowly forming, a feeling, beginning to grow from understanding and sharing. Day by day, Ethan felt the change in his heart. The feeling he hadn't experienced in years, connection, love, was beginning to return. He no longer lived just for Lily. He lived for himself, too, for the peace Rachel brought him. That feeling wasn't just friendship or support in difficult times. It was a deep connection, a relationship both of them were starting to cherish. She was no longer just the girlfriend he had hired. She was the person he wanted to share his life with. And more importantly, she was someone he felt he couldn't live without in the days ahead. One evening after they had dinner together, and everything had settled with Lily asleep, Ethan and Rachel sat in the living room, quietly drinking tea. No words were needed. A simple glance was enough to communicate everything. The feelings had begun, no rush, no need to define everything. Do you think we can make this work? Rachel asked, her voice soft, her eyes searching his for agreement. Ethan looked at her and answering right away. He felt the emotions in his heart, not just empathy, but love. Finally he smiled, his eyes lighting up, responding with hope in his voice. We can make it work, Rachel. And I know we can go farther. One autumn morning, the warm sunlight poured through the living room window, filling the space with life and energy. Ethan walked into the living room where Rachel and Lily were sitting on the large rug playing a puzzle. This simple scene made him feel happiness, something he hadn't felt in a long time in his home. Lily giggled every time she placed a piece in the right spot, and Rachel, though not Lily's biological mother, did the job excellently. She had become the companion Lily had found warmth and trust in. And Ethan, standing from a distance, couldn't help but recognize the profound change in his family. Lily looked up and saw Ethan, her eyes lighting up as if she was racing against time to say something important. Dad, I are playing a really fun game. Will you play with us? Ethan smiled, warmth flooding his heart. He walked over and sat down next to Rachel. Sure, I'll play with you. But when he looked into Rachel's eyes, he realized that what he was feeling wasn't just the responsibility of a father. It was something deeper, a feeling he didn't know he had lost. That feeling, the bond between him and Rachel, wasn't a simple or quick connection. It had been built over quiet conversations, over evenings spent working together in the kitchen, over shared glances in quiet moments, and over caring for Lily together. He couldn't deny that the connection was forming naturally, bit by bit. Rachel wasn't the woman he once thought would replace Kate. She wasn't trying to be a mother in Lily's life. She was simply herself, a woman with a past, with dreams unfulfilled, but with an open heart and the ability to love sincerely. And that, unintentionally, had helped Ethan rediscover the parts of himself he had lost. One day, when Ethan and Rachel went shopping together, they spent the whole afternoon wandering through stores, picking out items to decorate the house. It was the first time he truly felt like he was building a life with someone, not just a family on paper, but a real home. The small stories, the laughter that never stopped, all seemed to be signs of a deep transformation in his heart. What do you think of this pillow? Rachel asked, holding up a pale yellow cushion for Ethan to see. He looked at the pillow for a moment, then at her, a sense of enjoyment rising in him. It looks like it would fit perfectly in our living room. He replied, then laughed when he saw Rachel look at him, as though she already knew his answer. Well then, let's take it, Rachel said with a smile, continuing to choose other items. We can decorate the house together, like a real family. Ethan looked at her, a strange but sweet sensation sweeping through his heart. He had never imagined that someone who was once an outsider, someone he had hired for a business reason, could become such an important part of his life. The harmony between him and Rachel wasn't something he had sought, but it was exactly what he needed right now. She brought him peace, and that warmth spread not only through him, but also through Lily, who had quickly come to see Rachel as a close family member. Lily was hugging the pillow, sitting next to Rachel on the sofa, reading a book together. Every time Rachel read a story, Lily looked at her with shining eyes, as if she had found a companion, a real mother figure in Rachel. And that made Ethan's heart ache, not with worry, but with the overwhelming love he felt. Ethan wondered, could he love again? Could he build a new family, one that didn't have to start over from scratch? Everything seemed to be happening so naturally, without a plan, without pressure, just connection and feelings he never thought possible. Dad, Mom Z tells great stories, Lily said happily. Ethan smiled softly and looked at Rachel. You did a great job, he said warmly, filled with appreciation. Rachel looked at him, and smiled, her eyes full of tenderness. Lily is such a wonderful girl. I'm so happy to be here with you both. Ethan felt the warmth in Rachel's words. He didn't know how he had changed, but he knew that in this home the connection between them was growing deeper. Everything didn't feel like a burden or responsibility anymore. It felt like a choice from the heart. He no longer felt alone. Rachel had become an essential part of his life, and he felt that he couldn't live without her. Rachel, have you ever thought about the future? Ethan asked, his voice soft, but carrying a seriousness. Rachel looked up at him, not rushing to answer. She sat quietly for a moment, as though contemplating his question. I think about the future every day, Ethan, but not in the way I think everything has to go. I want to live true to my feelings, and I believe that if we walk through life together, everything will come naturally. Ethan looked at her, his heart beating a little faster. He didn't know what to say. He felt the sincerity in Rachel's words, the understanding, the empathy she had for him. He realized that he had found something more valuable than anything he had in his past life. You're right, Ethan said, his voice deepening. I've lived too long behind walls I built myself, but now I want to try living true to my feelings, to try once without plans, without defenses. Rachel smiled, a gentle, loving smile. Then let's walk through it together, Ethan. We don't need to know everything just to go through life together. Ethan felt the bond between them stronger than ever. He no longer had any doubts about their relationship. Everything was no longer an experiment. It was a journey that he and Rachel would walk together. Every morning, Ethan felt that things were slowly changing for the better. The loneliness, something that had worn him down for years, was no longer present. Instead, there was peace, a connection not only between him and Rachel, but also within their small family. Lily, with her radiant smile every time she ran to him, had become the light of their home. But beyond the deep love he had for his daughter, Ethan also recognized something important. The relationship between him and Rachel was progressing rapidly. Their conversations were growing more intimate, and the warm glances were no longer unfamiliar. The feelings between them seemed to have ripened, no longer marked by the initial hesitations, but a true connection. However, that didn't mean everything would unfold smoothly. An unexpected event had changed everything that was happening in their lives. Ethan walked into the house after a long day at work. He had a crucial meeting with partners all day, and now all he wanted was to get home, relax, and have dinner with Rachel and Lily. But as soon as he opened the door, he noticed something was different in the atmosphere. Lily was sitting on the sofa, her gaze distant, while Rachel stood near the window looking outside with a sad expression. There was something in her eyes that made Ethan feel uneasy. Something wasn't right. Ethan spoke up, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. Rachel turned around, her eyes looking at him cautiously, as if there was something she didn't want to say. Hi, Ethan. You're home. Ethan looked at Lily, then back at Rachel, a sense of worry beginning to creep into his mind. What's going on? He asked quietly, not wanting to worry Lily. Rachel sighed and shook her head, looking down at her hands. It's nothing. It's just... Today I received a message from the past. She paused, seemingly searching for a way to continue the story without making Ethan feel uneasy. Ethan squinted, moving closer. A message from the past. He felt the oddity in the way she spoke. What kind of message? It was a notification, Rachel replied, her voice slow and filled with concern. About a part of my past that you don't know about. Ethan shivered involuntarily. Although he had sensed that Rachel had a complicated past, He hadn't expected it to affect their present like this. Doubts which had been lurking in his mind began to rise like a powerful wave. Rachel, Ethan said, his eyes focused on her. Can you explain more? Rachel looked at him, her eyes containing an entire untold story. She sighed softly, then stepped closer to him, her hand gently brushing Ethan's shoulder, an action she had done many times before. But today it felt heavy. I don't want to hide anything from you, Ethan. But someone from my past sent me an old photo and a message. The photo is of me when I used to work as a fake girlfriend, a job I did before I met you. Ethan froze, his eyes locked on Rachel, his heart pounding. Who is she? He asked, his voice dropping. Rachel didn't answer immediately, only looked at him with a look of guilt. I did that job for a long time, Ethan. Before I met you. I used to help many people like that, lonely people, people who needed someone by their side at social events. But it was just a job, nothing more. Ethan stood motionless, everything suddenly becoming blurry in his mind. The relationship between him and Rachel, which had been growing deeper, was now being tested by the shadows of her past. He couldn't stop doubting, couldn't stop wondering if everything he felt for her was real, or if it was just another role she had gotten used to playing. Do you still do that job? Ethan asked, his voice tinged with bitterness. Rachel looked at him. Her eyes filled with sorrow. No, I don't anymore. I don't want to live in fake roles anymore. I want to live true to myself with my real feelings. Ethan stared at her, a part of him wanting to believe her, but another part of him could not stop doubting. I need to understand everything. I know that. But I don't want this to destroy everything between us. Rachel lifted her gaze to him, her eyes filled with sincerity. Ethan, I understand how you feel. I know my past can't be changed, and I can't change what happened. But what I feel now with you and Lily is real. I don't want to hurt you. A part of Ethan wanted to believe what she said, but another part couldn't easily accept that Rachel's past was this complicated. His heart clenched not only because of the doubt, but also because of the fear that everything he had built could be shattered in a moment. Things were no longer as they were. The peaceful mornings, the quiet dinners, now carried a heavy silence. He couldn't stop thinking about what Rachel had said about her past, and whether everything was just a part of a bigger plan that he didn't fully understand. Ethan looked at Lily, who was still happily oblivious, unaware of the doubts weighing heavily on his heart. But he knew he had to do something to resolve this. He couldn't continue living in doubt. If the feelings between him and Rachel were real, he had to face her past and find a way to move past those shadows. He called Rachel into the office where the light illuminated every corner of the room, creating a serious atmosphere. Rachel, we need to talk, he said, his voice firm. Rachel stood in front of him, her eyes filled with guilt, but also with a determination in her gaze. You need to know more about my past, don't you? Yes, Ethan replied immediately, his gaze not leaving her. I can't live in doubt anymore. I need to know who you really are, and I need to know if what we're building is truly solid. Ethan looked at her, his heart filled with worry and doubt. Everything between him and Rachel had suddenly become unclear. Their relationship, which he thought he understood, now stood at a difficult crossroads. He couldn't simply ignore her past, especially as the darker aspects of it began to surface. Finally, Rachel took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she spoke. Ethan, I know you won't easily accept my past, and I don't expect you to. But I can't keep hiding it. You need to know. Ethan stood up, extending his hand toward her. Rachel, you don't have to tell me everything right now. But you need to understand that I need to know, I need to understand the truth. What's between us isn't just what's happened in the last few days. Your past may affect our future." Rachel looked at him, her eyes filled with pain, but also resolve. "I did this job to survive Ethan. I'm not proud of it, but it was the only way I could make it. I worked as a fake girlfriend for many years, accompanying men who needed someone at events, parties, important meetings. No feelings, no attachments, just a job." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He hadn't expected Rachel to have such a past, even though she had told him about the difficulties she had faced. He understood that she didn't do it out of passion or enjoyment. But the way she spoke, the sense of fatigue and fear in her voice made him even more confused. "So how long did you do this job?" Ethan asked, unable to hide his surprise and concern. "I did it for 4 years. Then I decided to leave. I didn't want to live that fake life anymore. I started rebuilding my life, trying to find a real job, a way to be free. But life was never easy, and I couldn't forget what I had done." She stopped, her eyes meeting Ethan's as if waiting for his reaction. "I know this will disappoint you, but I couldn't keep hiding it. You might be angry, you might think I'm not worthy, but I can't live in a lie anymore." Ethan fell silent, his mind in turmoil. Everything he had built, every feeling he had for Rachel, suddenly felt like a game, a role she was playing. He couldn't hide his disappointment, but he also didn't want to hurt Rachel, who had become an irreplaceable part of his and Lily's life. "Rachel," he began, his voice dropping. "I don't know what to say. What you just told me, it confuses me. I thought we could start over, that we could build a future. But you have this past. Can you really change?" Rachel looked at him, her eyes filled with pain but also determination. "Ethan, I've changed. I don't do that job anymore. I don't want to go back to the past. What I'm doing now is real, and my feelings for you are real. I don't want to hide anything from you, but I also don't want to become someone you see as just a role." Her words struck Ethan like a bolt of lightning. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know whether he could continue trusting what they had. But a part of him still didn't want to let go, didn't want this promising relationship to fade away just because of her past. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about what Rachel had said. He couldn't ignore her past, but he also couldn't ignore the feelings they had shared. The fatigue, the confusion rose inside him. He needed time to think, but nothing was certain. One evening, when Lily had gone to bed, Ethan and Rachel sat across from each other in the living room, the quiet space only illuminated by soft lights. Rachel looked at Ethan, her eyes filled with anticipation. "Ethan, I can't force you to forgive me right away." She began, her voice low, full of regret. "I know I can't erase the past, but I want to show you that I'm the person who truly wants to change. I don't want to hurt you or Lily." Ethan looked at her, struggling to find the right words to respond. "Rachel, you don't understand what I'm feeling. Everything between us has changed. I can't just overlook that easily, but I don't want to hurt you either. I need time, I really need time." Rachel nodded, her face filled with understanding. "I understand, Ethan. I'll give you time. But I also don't want to become a stranger in your life. I've seen what you've lost, and I don't want to be the one who hurts you more." It was an old photo. A photo of Rachel with a man Ethan didn't know standing beside her at an event. And beneath the photo, a brief message. "She's still doing this right." Ethan looked at the photo, feeling doubt rising again. He couldn't tell what this meant. Was this a truth he hadn't known? Was Rachel still in contact with people from her past? He couldn't sit still. He felt the need to resolve this right away. But at the same time, a part of him feared that the truth might destroy everything he had built with Rachel. Rachel was sitting on the sofa, just like every other day, but this time Ethan couldn't pretend nothing was happening. He stepped in, holding the phone, his eyes locked on her. "Rachel, can you explain this photo?" he asked, his voice firm but weary. Rachel looked up at him and her eyes darkened. "Did you get a message?" Ethan nodded, saying nothing more. Rachel took a deep breath, then let her hands fall. "What do you want me to explain? I can't change my past. The people in that past are still part of my life, even if I've changed." Ethan felt a coldness inside him. "So you're still in touch with them?" Rachel didn't answer immediately. She stared at him for a long time, then quietly said, "Ethan, I cut off all contact a long time ago. I don't want to be the old person, the one you can't trust. I want us to move forward." Ethan looked into her eyes, feeling the uncertainty and worry in his heart. Was everything really as she said? Or was he just seeing what he wanted to see? The conversation wasn't over, but the doubts still lingered in his heart. The relationship between Ethan and Rachel became more tense than ever. Despite the promises of a bright future, doubts lingered, impossible to shake off. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about what he had learned, the old photos, the rumors, and the messages that kept him uneasy. Every day that passed, his heart felt torn between two emotions, his love for Rachel and the growing doubts about her past. However, what hurt Ethan the most was the silence between them. The house that was once filled with laughter now felt eerily quiet. Every time he looked into Rachel's eyes, he saw something broken. She was no longer the woman he thought he knew, and that left him feeling lost. Today was no different, but he couldn't shake the confusion in his mind. Over the past few days, he had told himself that he needed to confront the truth, not about Rachel's past, but about his own feelings. He had felt that what she said was real, but how could he move past the ghosts of her past? A light knock on the door, and then Lily appeared, running into the room with a bright smile. She rushed to him, sitting on the floor, her innocent eyes unaware of the tension between the adults in the house. This sight pained Ethan. Part of him wanted to protect Lily from everything, but he didn't know how to protect himself from the turmoil inside. "Dad, where's Mom?" Her voice as innocent as ever, as if nothing had changed. Ethan smiled softly and pointed toward the yard where Rachel was standing. "Mom Z is outside. You can go play with her if you'd like." Lily didn't say anything else, just hurried out the door. Ethan watched her, his heart tightening. He knew that the connection between Lily and Rachel had developed quickly, and he also knew that while he might not be able to overlook Rachel's past, Lily didn't have those doubts. She simply trusted and loved. He couldn't continue living in this uncertainty. His relationship with Rachel couldn't just be about awkward conversations or pretending to be happy. They needed to truly face each other and find a way to heal the wounds. Ethan knew he couldn't remain silent any longer. He had to express what he was feeling, to understand the emotions Rachel was holding inside, the things she hadn't fully shared. He wanted her to understand that he couldn't easily forget his doubts, but he also didn't want those doubts to destroy everything they had built. The living room was quiet now, the soft yellow light illuminating both of their faces. Ethan looked into Rachel's eyes, feeling something both painful and fragile in her gaze. She was no longer the woman he thought he understood, but a part of him still wanted to believe in what she had said. "Rachel, you're struggling with everything that's happened." Ethan began, his voice honest, but also filled with patience. "I need you to help me understand my feelings and yours." Rachel looked at him, her eyes full of caution. "Ethan, I understand. You can't easily overlook what's happened. But I can't do anything other than explain. I've changed. I'm no longer the person I was. I left that life behind because I didn't want to be trapped in fake roles anymore. What do you want from me, Ethan asked, his eyes not leaving hers. I can't forget your past, Rachel. But I also don't want to hurt you. I just need to know that you've truly changed, that you really want to start over. Rachel lowered her head, then looked up with determination in her eyes. I can't erase what I've done, Ethan. But I can prove that I want to change. I don't want to live in the past anymore. I want to build a future with you, with Lily. I don't want to just be a part of an old memory. I want to be a part of this family. Ethan felt the sincerity in her words, but his heart still couldn't let go of all the doubts. He looked into her eyes, feeling each of her words, each story she had lived through. Maybe he had been too harsh, too stubborn. But could he really overlook what had happened in the past? The next day, Ethan decided to spend the entire day thinking, finding the answers for himself. He walked around the area near the house, his thoughts tangled in his mind. Each step was an effort to clear away the ambiguity, to decide whether he could continue down this path with Rachel. But during the walk, he realized he couldn't live in doubt forever. He had lost so much before, and if he kept living in hesitation, he would never find true happiness. Happiness wasn't perfection. It was the ability to accept scars, mistakes from the past, and learn to love even with imperfections. Ethan returned home, his mind finally clear. He needed to give Rachel a chance to prove herself, but more importantly, he needed to give himself a chance to love and be loved. He stood watching them for a long moment, an odd warmth filling his heart. What he was looking for wasn't perfection, but acceptance and true love. He couldn't ignore Rachel's past, but he could accept it and build a new future with her. He walked over and sat beside Rachel. She looked up, her eyes filled with concern, but also a glimmer of hope. Ethan, Rachel said softly, her voice gentle. He looked at her, then gently took her hand. I can't say that I've forgotten everything, Rachel, but I won't let these doubts destroy us. I want us to have a real chance, a chance to start over. Rachel looked at him, her eyes lighting up, and a gentle smile spread across her face. I won't disappoint you, Ethan. I'll prove that I can change. Ethan felt a wave of warmth rise in his chest. This wasn't just a promise, it was a sincere commitment from both sides. He had allowed himself to believe in the feelings between them, and he believed Rachel was ready to face the challenges ahead with him. Ethan and Rachel no longer had the heavy silences between them. Every day they rebuilt old habits, small moments they had overlooked before. They went for walks together, cooked together, and most importantly, they spent time with Lily. The evenings at sunset, simple dinners filled with laughter. Everything was beginning to create the warm family atmosphere they had dreamed of. Ethan gradually felt the change within himself. He no longer felt weary or confused when facing Rachel. He was starting to love her not just for what she had done for him, but for the sincerity and love she brought to him and Lily. On a weekend evening, when the whole family was gathered together in the living room, Rachel began telling Lily a fairy tale. The little girl sat beside her, listening intently to every word, her eyes glowing with dreams of a magical world. Ethan sat across from them watching, feeling a warmth in his heart. He realized that he was no longer alone. He no longer just had Lily, but now he also had Rachel, the one who would walk with him through life. Would you like Mom Z to teach you how to dance? Rachel asked Lily when the story ended. Lily nodded, her eyes shining. I'd love that. Ethan looked at the two most important women in his life, and he didn't know when it happened, but he realized that he had found true happiness. Love, it wasn't perfection, but the ability to find each other through difficult times, the acceptance and commitment to build a future. He had chosen Rachel, and Rachel had chosen him. Ethan and Rachel's love was no longer about doubts, no longer about hesitant words. It was about sharing, about empathy, and about a real commitment that even though life might never be perfect, they would continue to walk through the challenges together and build a complete family. Spring arrived gently, like a fresh breeze carrying the scent of life. The spring rains had passed, leaving behind a clear sky and a fresh, cool atmosphere. Inside Ethan's home, everything seemed to be changing as well, from the cold stones in his heart to the joy and warmth now filling the space they lived in. He no longer felt the loneliness he once did, no longer felt as though he was living alone in a silent world. The feeling of love and connection was now present in every morning. They woke up to every meal they shared and every simple conversation they had. But the most important thing was the feeling of family, a real family, not a family in name only, not a family with presence but without connection. A real family was a place where love, care, and truly shared moments existed. And that was what Ethan, Rachel, and Lily had built together. Months later, Ethan's home was no longer a place solely of work and cold meetings. It had become a space filled with laughter, stories, and warmth from everyone who lived there. Rachel had slowly become an indispensable part of Ethan and Lily's life. They didn't just live together. They truly understood each other more deeply with each passing day, each precious moment. In the mornings, Rachel and Lily would prepare breakfast together. Lily would help Rachel by mixing eggs or chopping vegetables while Rachel taught her about new dishes. Although Rachel was never Lily's real mother, she always gave her unconditional love and care. Every time Lily called her mom Z, Rachel felt an overwhelming joy. It wasn't just a title given to her because she was Ethan's girlfriend, but a name tied to the genuine affection Lily had for her. Ethan watched the scene from afar, a sense of peace wrapping around him. He couldn't help but recognize that this was exactly what he had dreamed of, even though he had never dared to believe in the possibility of building a complete family after Kate's death. But now he realized that love wasn't something that only happened once in a lifetime, and a family wasn't just about having members present, but about the love and connection between them. One day in early June, when things seemed more stable, Ethan sat with Rachel in the living room looking out the window. Everything outside was lush and green, and in his heart, he felt light and full of hope. However, there was one thing that Ethan still felt incomplete about. He wanted to do something special to thank Rachel, thank her for stepping into his life, for everything she had done for him and Lily. Rachel, he began, his voice soft, but filled with sincerity. I want to tell you something important. Rachel paused, looking at him attentively. She didn't know what he was going to say, but there was one thing she always felt: change in his heart. She sensed that he wasn't just a man living day by day anymore. He was a man who had opened his heart to love again. I'm listening, Ethan. Rachel replied, her voice warm. I know we've been through many challenges, but I can't help but feel lucky to have you in my life. You're not just my girlfriend, my woman. You are my family. You've helped me and Lily rebuild what we lost, and I know you're someone I can share everything with. I love you, Rachel, and I want us to go through this life together. Rachel looked at him, her eyes lighting up as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. But then she smiled gently, took his hand and answered, I love you too, Ethan, and I thank you for giving me this chance. I will always be here with you and Lily. Not long after, an important event took place that marked a turning point in their lives. One evening in June, Ethan decided to throw a small party at home to celebrate the change in his family. He didn't invite too many guests, just a few close friends, some colleagues, and people who had helped him through difficult times. But the most important guests were those closest to him, Rachel and Lily. That evening, the warm golden lights filled the house, their glow creating a cozy atmosphere. Ethan stood at the door watching the guests arrive, his heart full of gratitude. This scene wasn't just a party. It symbolized the change in his life. "We did it, didn't we?" Ethan whispered to Rachel as she stood beside him. Rachel smiled, her eyes full of pride and love. "We did. And this is just the beginning." Lily ran up, holding a small cake she had made in the kitchen with Rachel. "Dad, I made this cake for you," she cheered, holding it up to Ethan. He smiled, took the cake, and pulled her into a tight hug. "Thank you, Lily. You're the best." He kissed her forehead, feeling a sense of complete happiness with his daughter beside him. The party continued in a joyful atmosphere with stories, laughter, and eyes filled with love. Ethan looked around at the people present, and in that moment, he felt that everything had changed. His life was no longer just about work success or emotionless parties. His life now was about shared moments, warm evenings with family, real conversations, and most importantly, home. In the photo, Rachel and Lily were standing together, holding hands, smiles on their faces. For the first time in many years, Ethan felt that he didn't just have a family, he had a real family. He looked at Rachel, who was tidying the living room, and his heart filled with love. Finally, he had found what he had lost all these years. Not just a family, but a complete family, one full of love, sincerity, and sharing. "Thank you," he said quietly, as Rachel turned to look at him. For what Rachel asked, a gentle smile appearing on her lips. "For helping me and Lily find what matters most in life, love and connection." Rachel didn't answer, just smiled and walked over to him. She sat beside him, and they looked at each other in silence, as if everything they needed to say had been communicated through their eyes. They both knew that despite the challenges life might bring, despite the fact that the future would never be perfect, they would always be there for each other, overcoming everything together. Their life was no longer about doubts, no longer about insurmountable challenges. Every day that passed was a day they built love and connection, rising together from the difficulties, welcoming new joys. Their family had been built on the solid foundations of love, understanding, and commitment. And that was the most important thing they could achieve in life.